This is Mafia 3 Definitive Edition. We're on Xbox One X, and it is actually enhanced now. When they first released this definitive version of the game, they actually neglected to reinstall the enhancements to the game, but now I waited patiently for the update. It's fixed, and yeah, it's actually looking really good, and it's running fairly well. Now with that, it does have some bugs and some other little tiny details, but we're going to jump into that. So this is Mafia 3, and we're not too far into the game, but a fair bit into it. We're kind of at the point where things have started to take a shift in terms of the narrative. We're now going to start approaching each of the individual areas of the very large map in order to take them over for ourselves. And that's an interesting aspect of the plays, that you're going kind of district by district in order to tackle the various enemies and foes that you have out there. So this is a very different sort of game, and we're going to just kind of be driving around, walking around a little bit, because in the style of what this is a very mature title. It's very adult in nature. It's very much a game that aims to emulate the times. So the themes and the content in this are very graphic, and hopefully by doing this more casual driving showcase approach, we'll be able to do things without anything too intense for YouTube to be shown. So you're playing as Lincoln Clay. You are an individual that's coming off of a really intense war situation, you know, having been in Vietnam. You're coming back home, you're meeting your family, and you get kind of pulled into some of the issues that are happening with the group. You know, it's not a great time. You're at war with a other kind of gang group, and you gotta kind of deal with those, and then from there you meet other individuals and kind of connect and interact with them. It's quite interesting, and it's a little bit of a different game from the other Mafia titles. So this one, basically has you doing more of an action type of game. Not to say the other ones weren't action based, but this one does heavily lean more towards being fast paced combat, as opposed to being something that's a little bit slower, a little bit more tactile. This one's all about speed, getting in there, blasting opponents. It's more of a generic action game in that regard, which is, I guess, a little bit disappointing coming off of the second one, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I really did like the second game quite a bit coming in to play it. So for those coming off of playing this, because, you know, this did come out not too long ago for it to get a definitive edition. With that, keep in mind that there haven't really been changes to the game. You do get all of the content that released for it, as far as DLC releases and everything go, but, you know, nothing really has greatly been adjusted for this game. You know, there's nothing really new content-wise. And I just wanted to kind of get that across in terms of like what this game is and what it provides. For those coming in for the first time, this is a great way to play it. If you're holding off for the game to be fixed up, it has been. It looks much better. It's still, again, like I said at the beginning, it's got those bugs. Some of the pop-in isn't great. It's a little bit bad looking. There's little tiny technical details and issues. And I think those kind of were maybe made a little bit worse by them doing this definitive release. That being said, it's still a pretty entertaining game. The story is kind of framed through a documentary style, which I find really quite fascinating. It's kind of being told from the future, and then you're playing in as, like, you know, it's a kind of a documentary style. You get the point of what I'm saying. It's really quite interesting that they framed it like that. They framed it in the style of a documentary, with flashbacks that you would maybe see on something like a TV show where they try to reenact certain situations, and I think that's kind of cool. It's interesting. I mean, there's lots of combat and stuff. You're not really seeing that here because I'm just kind of walking around trying to show off what the world is like. But again, that's to prevent anything too wild from showing up in the game. I'm kind of trying to show off the world. So anyways, like I was saying, something bad happens. This guy's mad. He's decided, hey, I'm going to take the city for myself. And you basically do something that is a little bit repetitive after this point, where you're kind of redoing the same thing, doing a few missions, and then you're taking down somebody, and then taking that area, and that kind of feeds into the ending options. And yeah, That's the gist of what that is. So this is an open world game, and unlike the previous title where the open world was basically just a backdrop to the events that was happening, or were happening, now it's actually a city where there are side missions. It's quite lively. There's a number of buildings you can go to. It feels more alive than the previous one did, and that advances things quite a bit, though I'm still not sure how much you're going to want to wander around doing stuff. There are like some collectible type things too, but yeah. And with the driving, the last game was very, very technical. This one's got kind of options, so you would have something that is a bit more of an intense experience where you are actually, this driving specifically, there's a more intense driving option if you want it to be a little bit more realistic. And then there's also the arcade option, so they kind of cover both of the grounds there. So this is like the late 60s. It's in New Bordeaux. I think that's the correct way to say that. Very different setting for the series. It kind of ditches the, I guess you could say, old school mob movie style thing, the Italian mobs. But I like that they went with this style of kind of a gangster era. I think that was maybe the right choice to do. You're seeing the kind of pop in here with the lights. Yeah, that's kind of what bothers me. There's a boat segment too early on that kind of did that. But like I was saying, it's a very different type of mob setting, and I think it's kind of neat that it goes into that era because it's not really something that is covered much, in movies or even games. I mean, there's been a few of them, but you get the sense of what I'm saying, the fact that it's like a very, very different sort of experience when it comes to what you're doing, the themes of the narrative. And again, it's a very, very mature title in terms of the graphic, vocal content and the themes and how the attitudes are. And they even have a disclaimer at the start, just like the last game, where it kind of goes over, hey, this is something that is meant to emulate the times and everything like that, which is good. I think it's important to have games, movies, and pieces of art and work that kind of dig into some of the sensitive topics, and especially those eras, instead of trying to sugarcoat it or pretend that certain things didn't happen, because that's how you get people to kind of learn what things were like, and I think this one properly emulates that style very well. So it's a decent game. It's not quite, I didn't like it quite as much as I liked the second game. There's a lot more kind of to do in it, I think, a lot going on, but it really is kind of more of a run-of-the-mill action game where you're going around blasting folks, doing the missions, enjoying the cutscenes. Cutscenes are very well done, though. I was very surprised. And I want to say that the soundtrack that you can hear, because we get dinged hard on the monetization, wow, the soundtrack is just incredible. And I said soundtrack, good and clear, yeah, okay. The music here, what you listen to in the car during key segments, it's really great high-level songs from that era. They absolutely deliver in that regard. I was truly surprised by, the option there when it comes to the sound quality. I was not expecting to get, those kind of big hits in here. It's a very large soundtrack, too, across the different stations and the different moments that you kind of visit. Kind of seeing the switch there. So you do obviously get a number of weapons, a number of tools. We're not really showing that because in combat all the yelling and stuff is a bit much, but gotta get running around. You get to build your empire on the ashes of what were left behind. I think it's a cool game. It's a very distinct sort of title. It is enjoyable. I mean, things do heat up. It's quite sort of linear at the start, and then once you get into this point, it opens up quite a bit. You get new opportunities for what you want to do, and then the action you want to have. I think it's kind of interesting. It's a very interesting game. Again, this being the full version, so all of the content is available, all of the DLC and everything. So it's a full rounded experience of what this was. And again, just to kind of summarize, it is a more action-packed version of the Mafia series. It does some interesting things with the content and the formula of what it's aiming to provide. I thought it was unique. I like the material that it covers because it's deep. It's at times hard to kind of deal with, but it's still like a kind of exciting and neat kind of game. I like the protagonist. I like the idea of the protagonist here because it's kind of a different sort of character. You know, it's a character that you might see more in movies as you would see opposed to in like video games, just due to the, you know, coming off the war thing. But I mean, they did that same beat with the second game as well, right? Where you start in the war. This one didn't throw you into Vietnam, but you're coming off the war, so it's kind of the same beat there. But a lot of other games don't really do that. But yeah, it's interesting. I just wanted to really show it off at this point now that they cleaned everything up, made it look a lot better, make it run a lot better. Obviously, you've been seeing throughout some little hiccups here or there, but for the most part, quite well done, quite an improvement over the horrible looking state the game was in when they first released this definitive edition, because I was trying to play like a little bit of it, you know, to kind of see what it was looking like with that on it, and it was very rough to kind of play and view. It looked ugly on the you know, the premium console here. But now that they got the patch going, with bringing the enhancement back, bringing the HDR, it looks really good. And I'm very pleased with what they've done with Mafia 3 in terms of getting it shiny. I mean, it's not all elements kind of carry forward in that regard. It's sometimes a little bit generic, but overall, decent game, neat themes, and generally wild ride with one tough character lead. This guy is ready to battle.